Victor is one of the most suspicious characters in this show, and there is significant evidence that he is being used by the entity who's in control of the monsters.
You've been here a pretty long time, huh?
For a long time, there was nobody else. There were no talismans then. Everyone had to hide.
Why the fuck am I having visions of a story some dead woman told 40 years ago?
Like when Victor is talking to Sarah about what life was like living in the town when he was a child, Victor specifically says that back in those days, the people of the town did not have any talismans. And there's this other scene where Jade says that Victor's mom died roughly 40 years before the current storyline. This logically means that Victor has survived a whopping 37 or so years living in the town without any talismans whatsoever, and he has never been attacked at any point by any of the monsters, not even in the current timeline taking place in the show right now. This is completely insane and is clearly one of the biggest clues that Victor's survival is something that has been allowed by the entity that's in control of the monsters.
Those things, they never run. It's like they're taking their time because they know there's only so many places we can go.
This scene right here is very relevant to just how high up the hierarchy Victor's role actually is in the game. Because we see Victor's mom getting taken out by one of the monsters, and this is crazy because we also see the milkman about to slice open Jade like a meat bag. That is, until Victor steps in, and it's only then that the Nightwalker stops its advance. These two scenes make it obvious to us as the viewers that the reincarnations of the parents of those demonic children are as vulnerable to being killed by the Nightwalkers as any other resident of the town. Which means that whatever the reason may be that the Nightwalkers have never at any point attacked Victor at any point in the past is something completely unrelated to whether he is or he isn't a reincarnation. And I also want to point out that we saw the monsters ruthlessly attacking Boyd in the barn and generally whooping his ass like crazy. So whatever Victor actually is significantly more important than both the reincarnated parents of the demonic children as well as Boyd himself. And this is what brings me to a very interesting moment with Victor.
I got bottom of the stairs. Jasper was telling secrets.
Something very noteworthy about this scene is that Christopher does not even react to Victor's presence in this moment. It was almost as if Christopher couldn't even see him. But do you know who could? Jasper, the demonic puppet, also known as the boy in white. And this makes sense because both the boy and Victor are actually storywalkers just like Julie.
You know how sometimes you dream and you forget, but then later you realize that it wasn't a dream? I think I'm starting to remember.
When Julie wakes up from storywalking in the ruins, she wasn't sure if what she'd experienced was real or a dream or whatever it may or may not be. And this is the same thing we see with Victor multiple times as he describes the things he's experienced in his life. It's also obvious that storywalkers have the ability to turn invisible because the kimono demon does the same thing, appearing to Fatima in the shack, then boom, she just disappears, and the boy in white does the exact same thing when Tabitha was climbing the lighthouse. She could not see him because he was making himself invisible until she got to the top, to the location where he could push her off. That's when he decided to reveal himself. There's also the fact that the entity was laughing at Boyd at the ruins while literally being invisible, along with Julie, Randall, and Marielle, who are also invisible at this moment. So storywalkers clearly have the ability to turn invisible, which explains why the entity himself sometimes seems to be omniscient. But the most important thing about Victor being a storywalker is it explains why the monsters choose not to attack him.
It's laughing at you for setting it free. It got so excited when it touched your arm.
How do I stop Julie?
Julie?
Okay, we gotta get her out of here.
It needs him to stay. It needs him to
Now, when the entity is laughing at Boyd in the ruins, Sarah hears it saying that it needed those 3 people to stay chained up in the dungeon. This means that the entity is using storywalkers like Julie for some purpose that we are not quite sure of at this point in the story, but if we assume Victor is a storywalker as well, then obviously he would have also had to have undergone this process of being a cicada victim and therefore being tortured in the dungeon. This is important to understand because the Nightwalkers completely ignored Randall in the forest directly because he was claimed by the cicadas. And remember, we know for a fact that they ignored him because they saw exactly where he was running to after he left the RV. This matters a lot because it means that the Nightwalkers cannot attack someone who has been taken possession of by the entity. So basically what I'm saying here is that Victor only survived the massacre because he was chained up in the dungeon being tortured and brainwashed into being a mole/possessible vessel for the entity himself. And remember, Julie, Randall, and Marielle only escaped because Boyd smashed the music box and set them free. And unfortunately for Victor, more than likely there was nobody to do the same thing for him, so he was just tortured that entire night until he became a slave to the entity, even though he doesn't even know it. And I think that is why the monsters have never attacked him. He was claimed by the entity literally decades before the series even began, so he never stood a chance. Not to mention, he was like 9 years old, so it's a very bad situation.
No, I am done fucking around. Everything you know, everything you've seen, that may be how we go home.
This is my home.
You know, Victor, if you keep coming down here, we'll make you stay.
There were no talismans then. Everyone had to hide.
Something that a lot of people never notice is that it's explicitly stated Victor's mom only started having visions and dreams after Victor himself was already born. This line is significant to me because it implies that whoever brings people into the town was specifically waiting until Victor was born to drag Victor's mom and his sister into the town. This is one of the many clues of how important Victor actually is to the powers behind the town, whoever they may or may not be. And this monster specifically says that they could never kill Victor, but what they can do is trap him. And this naturally brings up the obvious parallel between Victor and the old man that was chained up in the dungeon, because the entity refused to kill both Victor and Martin for at least decades, if not possibly even hundreds of years in the case of the old man, which logically implies that both of them are very or were very valuable to the entity because of one reason or another.
They always take you different places, but my mother said this one was special, that it would take her to the tower, to the children.
If there is a role known as a storywalker in the game, which we obviously know that there is, then it's very possible that Victor actually has a slightly different role. Like, what if Victor is actually the storyteller? If Victor theoretically has the ability to warp the reality of the town itself, that would be a very powerful ability that the entity would definitely want to have in his control. And it would definitely explain a lot of weird things about Victor, like how he clearly has the ability to control the faraway trees, just like the boy in white, which is something we know for a fact, because he knew where the rock he threw was going to come out. And of course, he was there when Tabitha was sent to the lighthouse, and he was also present when Julie was sent to the wine cellar. So yeah, it could genuinely be him, Victor, that is actually in control of the faraway trees. But I guess him being possessed by the essence of the entity might also explain how he was able to do those things. So
The boy in white was trying to tell Christopher that it started with the children, but someone who loved them told them a story. The story gave them hope.
another possibility is that Victor is actually a reincarnation but his original self is actually the one who told the Ankui children the story that was mentioned by the boy in white to have given the children hope. But this really would only work if the children are in fact not only evil, but they're also the creators of the monsters. And if they are both of those things, and Victor was the storyteller that was mentioned by the boy in white, then it would make sense why the monsters do not target Victor, because the beings controlling the monsters would want Victor to be kept safe, fed, and happy with an abundance of peaches for loving them when they were being tortured by the villagers of the town. And the whole Victor possibly being invisible in the church thing is something I only noticed because of this video by Parkland Media, which is a crazy find by him, but it makes sense because I've talked about invisibility clearly being an ability that some of these beings possess, like the kimono demon and the boy in white. So for Parkland Media to also notice the same thing, but for Victor specifically, I think it's obvious that it's going to be a thing. But apart from Victor, there's another character who has a very strong connection with the entity controlling the monsters, and that is, of course, Boyd himself. So watch this video next.